Hello, I'm Steven Roy Goodman, host of Higher Education Today, a production of the University of the District of Columbia. The purpose of this program is to connect you to contemporary issues, people, institutions, and organizations involved in the business of higher education in our nation and the world. Today, we'll be talking about the role of community colleges in the United States. My guests are two well-known experts in higher education. Dr. Jonathan Guevera is the Chief Executive Officer of the Community College of the District of Columbia. He is the former provost of the Alexandria campus of Northern Virginia Community College. Dr. Guevera received an Exemplary Leadership Award from the Chair Academy and is a member of Phi Theta Kappa. At the invitation of Dr. Jill Biden, Dr. Guevara supported UDC with student Shane Johnson's attendance at yesterday's first ever White House Summit on Community Colleges. Jim Boyle is president of the College Parents of America, the only national membership association dedicated to advocating and to serving on behalf of current and future college parents. Through grants and loans, Jim received his bachelor's degree from Northwestern University as a first-generation student from Detroit. Jim worked for many years on Capitol Hill before devoting his time to pocketbook education issues. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. If I can start with you, Dr. Guevara, I was kind of interested in your vision of a community college, of not only community colleges generally, but what you're hoping to do with the community college here at UDC, what your vision is and where you plan to take it, and what you think community colleges should be doing in the United States generally.
That's a very complex question, and I think that the historic event yesterday at the White House really brings that to the forefront. Community colleges have been around for well over 100 years, and it's only within the last 10 years or so that community colleges have gotten any real recognition for the value that they add to society in general. And when you talk about everything from workforce development to people going on to get baccalaureate degrees, community colleges play a significant role in that. Close to 50% of first-time freshmen start out at a community college for a variety of reasons, with close to 40, 50% in some cases in some school districts. In our district, 80% of the students who come to us from public schools require one or more developmental ed class. Where are they going to get it? Should they go to a four-year institution and do it there, or should they come to a community college? Well, from a fiscal standpoint, the community college is the place to do that. So, there are a variety of roles that community colleges have been called to play over the many, many years. But in terms of a vision of what I think and where we ought to be going, is that we certainly need to be addressing the workforce and the economic development and sustainability issues, but we really ought to be focusing on completion, the completion agenda, and that is completing the developmental work that people started, but also completing those degrees. We know that students who complete those associate degrees are more than likely to go on and complete those baccalaureate degrees when they begin. You mentioned me being at Northern Virginia. When I was at Alexandria, we worked with UVA, and they brought one of their baccalaureate programs to our campus because they realized that our students did just as well, if not better, than their native freshmen. And so they decided, we need to get more of these students in our campus.
Right. And Jim, if I can ask you, you run a national association that represents parents. How do you work with a lot of parents who are going to be sending their kids to community colleges? And if so, why do you do that?
I have to say, when we started the association, which was 7 years ago, we envisioned it as an organization that would support parents of what I would then call traditional college students, those who are going off to attend a four-year college or university. But we saw right at the beginning, and it's accelerated to today, the fact that a lot of parents, a lot of students, think it makes an awful lot of sense to start college at a community college. Some of the reasons have already been cited, fiscal being number one among those. If at the end of 4 years a student is going to get a BA degree, just from a purely financial standpoint, if the price of the first 2 years of that degree is significantly less than it would have been at the four-year school, right, and in the end they get that piece of paper, that's great. And I, as for many years, as one who interviewed potential employees in organizations where I worked, I actually gave a leg up. You know, I think at first it was sort of subconscious, but then as I thought about it, very consciously, I felt very strongly that if a student succeeded in a community college and then showed the wherewithal to then move on and get their bachelor's degree, they were someone who really cared about their education and who had pulled themselves up, had gotten that community college degree, had moved on and advanced, and I think that they were, you know, I saw them as excellent candidates.
Then, assuming that we all agree, and I think we do agree, that community colleges are important to the future of the United States, I guess my question to both of you then would be, you know, why is there now such a focus on this? You know, you could make the case that community colleges have been around for a while, as you did a moment ago, Dr. Guevera, but why are we paying attention to it now? Is it because President Obama is president? Is it because their economic situation is forcing a lot of students to do that? Why now? Why are we thinking about this right now?
Well, not many people refer back to President Bush, but I will in this context, because he, I think, was the first president to focus quite a bit on community colleges and on technical colleges, not only by doing events there, but by pushing for additional funding to support these schools in their workforce development. And I think that that's been expanded upon by the Obama administration. And so I think it's been kind of a rolling wave of greater attention, really over the past decade, being paid to community colleges.
But aside from that sort of those sort of presidential initiatives, it's become remarkably clear to many of us in higher education. You know, I started my higher ed career at a community college and then went on to work for universities and four-year institutions and then came back to the community college. Because one of the things that I saw is, you know, it's not a narrowing, but sort of a dwindling in the success rate of students coming out of community colleges. Many people start, and when you consider that, you know, we talk about the browning of America, and the majority of people in community colleges, you know, Latinos, African Americans, are more likely to go to a community college, and those are the populations that are increasing. And if we're not able to do something about those groups, and so many, aside from the presidential initiatives, community college leaders themselves, the Lumina Foundation, the Gates Foundation, have started to say, hey, wait a minute, if we want to continue to have a world-class society, we need to do something about this. You know, and I often joke with my students and I say, you know, when I'm being wheeled out in a wheelchair somewhere where somebody's going to put me in the sun at my ripe old age, I want to make sure that the person who's going to stick that needle up my arm has done the right things. I think also in terms of things like first responders, a significant number, it's well over 70%, who are actually trained at community colleges. So we're sort of seeing a wave that started, and then the presidential initiatives have just taken that up to another level.
But let's take this to the public policy level and the community college level together and intersect them. So why is there so much controversy then about the for-profit schools that, from what I understand, essentially compete against some of the community colleges? Then why is there so much controversy about that if what we're trying to do is graduate more students and help to make sure they're better first responders and stuff like that? Why wouldn't we want to basically have more people doing that?
And there's no question about that. The for-profit schools provide a much-needed service. Their tuitions are much higher, but they do graduate more of their students. You know, there are some who will argue about the quality of those students. You know, and that's not an issue I'm going to address at all, because I'm not an expert on looking at curriculum at that level. But the reason that so many people go there are varied, but one of the reasons that so many of the students who end up there take a typical, whether it's a single mom or dad, but an adult student who is working a full-time job and wants to go back to school. If you went to a community college, if you came to my institution, we're always short. I mean, look at my eyes. I've got bags under my eyes.
You look good. You look good.
With people working 10 hours, 12 hours a day to make this happen. Most of us, we had a projected enrollment for this fall of just over 2,400 students. We enrolled close to 2,700 students and had to shut the door on some students because we just did not have the physical space to do that. The controversy for the for-profits, however, is for those people who don't graduate and who aren't able to continue in those professions, the loans,
Right.
the high debt that they end up with, and that's where the controversy begins.
And in terms of the funding for nonprofit institutions like yours that you run, where does most of your money come from? Does it come from grants? Does it come from the district government? Does it come from the federal government? Where do you? Because if the for-profits are dealing with basically tuition, and of course I think you're correctly pointing out that the tough issue there is whether or not there should be that kind of loan debt on the burden of those students. But where does your money come from as an institution?
Community colleges in general are creatures of the public dollar funding. And so the money comes from a variety of, in most community colleges, it's state, it's local, and of course there's always some level of federal. In the district, we've received the same dollar amount, and I mean absolute dollar amount, for about 12 years for public higher education. So the money that comes to the community college is money that we eke out of the university's budget.
Right.
And it's going to take a lot, and the city leaders in terms of the executive and the legislative branches need to come to grips with how do you support a community college in the district if you want it to be successful.
And Jim, is this a problem around the country as well in terms of community colleges, in terms of the funding? Do we see this around the country?
Well, higher education funding in general faces pressures around the country. I think it's fair to say that in good times and in bad, over the past 25 years, states have been decreasing the amount that they make available for higher education. Part of the reason for that is they look around them and everybody drives the roads. They know they have a great health care through the Medicare system burden on many states. But not everybody, although we'd like to, of course, to increase the rate, not everybody participates in higher education. So for a state legislator who's facing decisions about where the money should go, they look and see this great demand for both community colleges and for four-year colleges, and people willing, it seems, to pay these higher prices. And so they make decisions to ratchet back the amount of subsidy they provide, and then when that happens, tuitions go up. And tuition, the cost of higher education for community colleges and for four-year colleges and healthcare have been the highest cost drivers over the past 20 years. But people know that they need to get these degrees in order to succeed in today's society. And so people continue to pursue higher education.
Fair enough. But I mean, in terms of the work that you're doing, I mean, are you lobbying on behalf of trying to get increased funds for institutions, or are you lobbying on behalf of parents? Or if you don't mind saying a word or two about that.
Absolutely, a little bit of both. I mean, I've told, when I testified before Congress, I said to Congress that they often get states looking to them, we need more money for this program. Well, in this case, it should really be the other way around just as much. It should be a eyeball to eyeball in the sense of looking out to the states and pointing out to them the importance of higher education in each state, the history of subsidy of higher education in each state and here in the district, and how it makes total sense from an economic development standpoint for a state to invest in higher education. Because look at college towns around the country. That's where real estate values have stayed up. Look at college towns around the country and nearby communities. That's where jobs are being created. So the workforce of the knowledge economy is being created at community colleges and at four-year institutions. And so the smart states need to recognize that and to support higher education because it's good for the long-term economic development of those states and the success of the citizens who live there.